Hey guys, welcome to another video. So today I thought I would share a little visit to a heritage site, Shakespeare's birthplace. Yeah, we're away for a couple of days in Stratford, and well, I've talked about it before, but I'm very inspired by history when it comes to designing my games. And so I thought maybe this year I'd share some occasions when we go out and have a look at historic sites. This is a museum dedicated to Shakespeare, and there's also the house where he was born. So we'll have a look at that. I guess the thing is, I want to share this for people who can't get to locations like this, but also, it might be inspiring to you. So let's just see how we do. Okay, so we're in John's house where Shakespeare was born.
I'm afraid you can't film in the house, sir. Sorry.
So I couldn't film inside Shakespeare's birthplace. The lady at the museum said I could, and then the guide said I couldn't, once I was actually inside the house. And it's a real shame. It's a very inspiring, atmospheric place. It's very kind of medieval and oldie worldy, and the kind of stuff I draw into my game design when I'm doing a fantasy game like 2D6 Dungeon and thinking about creating the world of Coradine. So, I can show you the outside of the building. So I'll cut a quick video clip of that in here. So why am I even uploading this video, you may ask? Well, there's one key reason, and I think as I move forward with this type of content on the channel, I want to talk about inspirations for game design. And so this, I will cite here that this is my first tip for inspiring your game design or your fiction or DMing. Take lessons from history. And I mean physically experiencing. I'm not talking about reading it from a book or having someone tell you about it, although I can tell you about it here and show you some stuff, but actually being there and seeing it is the key. And I had hoped that would come across in the video, but it didn't. And so I'm going to pick out a few things that inspired me from my visit to Shakespeare's birthplace and talk about those, and hopefully you too will be encouraged to get out to some museums and historical sites and see these things for yourself. My first point that I really took away from going to Shakespeare's birthplace, I did go honestly, was the fact that John Shakespeare, William's father, was a leather worker or a whitterer, a worker of white leather. And that's fantastic. An actual word for the type of worker who works with white leather. I mean, that's mind-blowing. That alone explodes world building in my mind. The reality of doing something for so long, and then obviously lots of people are doing it, so you've got to give it a name. And you can carry this through to your world creation when you're designing stuff. If you see a character or there's a role within your game that someone has spent many years doing, give it a name. This is just an amazing thing to think about. You're not just a leather worker, you are a whitterer. And I just found that fascinating. And John did his business from home. So when you go into the house, you see the leather gloves in one of the rooms hung up, and the guide was talking about the different types of leather glove, the embroidered ones, the two-fingered ones that the archers would use. And it was very inspiring. It made me think that there would be other workers within an environment. So if you're seeding a location, think about the minions, if you like, the people who are there, maybe gathering the leather up, maybe sewing some leather, maybe doing some cutting, boiling the skins. There are other roles, and it just made me think how active that space would have been when during the day, and they were busy getting everything ready for John to actually make the gloves. So we're looking at a situation where not only is this profession highly skilled with its own name, but it's going to have a whole bunch of people working around it. NPCs, characters who themselves may come forward one day and take on a higher role or a more important part in the story of whatever you're working with. I just found that presence, that industry, such a vital thing to how Shakespeare's upbringing was. I mean, he made over 50 technical references to glove making in his plays. It's obviously something that Shakespeare was heavily involved in as he grew up. And I just think that this can be applied to lots of situations. I'm going to take this type of example and put it into Corridine when I'm designing the world for 2D6 Dungeon, and think about those roles and jobs when I drill down on some history or some fiction for that world. So that was exciting and very informative. The second point that I took away, and I always find this interesting, is the role of civic office in a town or within a location. And in particular, the types of position that certain people found themselves in. Back in the 1500s, it was a lot of men with civic offices, but it didn't have to. In your world, it could be anything, you know. So examples of that would be that John, he had a number of jobs or roles within the civic society of Stratford. He was an alderman, a constable, a chamberlain, and a bailiff in Stratford-upon-Avon. Lots of important roles that no doubt gave him power. Now, if you're looking to create a civic structure within your towns, the worlds that you're creating, the games you're designing, you can easily look these up. Go to a thesaurus and you can type some of these words in and get a list of your own types of office that you could then create a structure for. And you don't have to know how civic offices worked in the 1500s when Shakespeare was alive. You can easily make this up and give it a hierarchy and just an impressive structure, and one man making moves for power within his local society. Maybe people asked him to do these roles, or maybe he pushed himself forward to these positions. But whatever the situation, it makes for interesting storytelling to have people in these types of positions, the types of encounters that they may well experience through them. So that's something to think about. A town isn't just a group of people living together. They form groups, they form bonds, and then create these offices. My third point is we often forget about the physicality of these older settings that are our fantasy settings. So what I mean by this is, when I went into Shakespeare's Birthplace, the timbers were exposed in many locations where they had the timber and the wattle and the door between, creating the classic kind of Tudor looking house with the timbers and the white plaster. What you just don't get it these days. Our houses are so clean and smooth and finished. Back then, the texture of wood was only, feet away, and you would touch it and feel it. And yet that would, in a sense, become a part of how you interacted with the world. You would maybe catch it, or The sounds of the wooden floors would be, you'd hear different parts of the house, and those are devices that we can take and put into the things that we create. And my fourth and final point is to do with things being homemade. So people would make things themselves. They'd have skills beyond their jobs that they would use to enhance their home. Like in the pictures that I'm going to put at the end of the video, you can see that they would design wall coverings to cover up the wall and maybe make the space warmer as well. They would make their own blankets and floor mats. They would design things to hang from walls. They would carve into the wood themselves. It was a much more personal space, and I think that's something that is easily forgotten these days, and something that adds character. And I think that if you have a character who makes stuff for their home, the home suddenly almost becomes more important to them. And that's the type of narrative you can weave into an RPG, into a game. And it also highlights the fact that things aren't necessarily perfect around the home. The mats aren't necessarily the best mats in the world. You may be using straw. You may be using scraps, and it just means that things aren't perfect, but they're personal, and it highlights the fact that you may find unique items, many unique items in a home if you were back in a kind of like a fantasy medieval setting. So I hope I haven't gone on for too long about this. For me, it's a massive thing. For others, it may not be as important, but I would highly recommend getting out to museums and historical locations and just experiencing yourself. It's more than informational knowledge. This is experiential. It's tactile. It's kinetic. It really feeds my subconscious and my passion. And guys, I hope that comes across. And I would just highly recommend getting out there. If you're designing games or writing fiction or DMing, do it. Go out and see some of these places. It will enrich what you do. So guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to click that thumbs up. And if you're not subbed already, it would be very cool if you could. I will catch up with you again very soon.